Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I was making some notes there. I know Phil was asking some questions there. I know this is also, I hope he doesn't mind me saying, it's very much David's world. He put that comment in there. I don't know if those guys want to jump back in. You know, please don't feel that you're monopolizing this stuff. If it's relevant, take stuff away. You know, that's what it's all about.
I'll jump in then, just to say thank you, Suchi. I thought that was great. And just to underline, I think obviously the situation of tight talent market at the moment does really require some breaking of these bad old habits of hiring in your own image, or hiring what you used to have in the role because that's what you understood worked, and really start challenging yourself as to where these people might be found. If you stop some of that predetermined selectivity about, you know, are they generally good chaps and run marathons or went to the right sort of school, got the right sort of degree. It's we've really got to be a lot cleverer, given the pipeline of people is just getting narrower and narrower as we put barriers in place to talent moving.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, you know, because you use a behavioral tool, David, it'll be interesting to hear about what are some of the, like, do you get pushback from, you know, hiring managers about using a behavioral tool, or how, you know, what's the best way that you tend to find to get buy-in from people? Because I think that's going to be important to the group here, is they probably think, oh, we'd love to use something like this, but how do we have that sea change, really? Oh, you're still on mute.
Very good question, and we have had this in a couple of live assignments currently, where it's easier to get it in at the front end. Why don't you sort of think about the job? What sort of person do you want to see in this role? And there's quite a nice job profiling tool within the PI portfolio. That's great. You get that done. Then you start screening the shortlist candidates, sending through the profiles, talking about the characteristics. But there comes a point where all that gets pushed to one side, and it's back to really like that person because, you know, they were at a company where I was, and I know that culture, and I know their boss, and so a lot of those shortcuts, I think, as somebody referred to them, come straight back in. So. I don't pretend I've got an answer to that, other than we are using it more and more at all levels of the process. So even before they've agreed that PI should be part of the mix, sending through, and this is what this candidate may exhibit in this sort of role, and this is why we think they're ready for a move. And you can sort of add a lot more data points than simply where they were and what they did.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point. You know, you do find people that will say that this is just another step, and then go back to their current ways. And I think some of the things that we found that are really successful for us is showing them return on investment. So saying, look, this is what we have actually found within your organization, or if you're internals, this is what studies have found. You know, you're much more likely to get the right people on board. But also just showing how consistently how it does move the needle on performance. And I think that is extra effort to prove out, but it's definitely worth doing so. And once you do that, one thing that we found is we get pulled very quickly into sales leadership or other supporting sales roles, because they understand, you know, what good looks like within one role, but then they think, but there's things within that team that other teams support. So what do they look like as well? You start a culture of then speaking about behaviors a bit more. And again, it then starts to challenge and stop some of the usage of labels that can be quite damaging when you are actually trying to figure out what you've got. The other thing that we found really successful is just by showing people very, even anecdotally, why someone is more likely to succeed within the role. We found talent acquisition is using behavioral profiles as not something that they get annoyed at using. They love it, because sometimes a hiring manager may discount. We've heard this recently. A hiring manager discounted someone because they paused before answering the question at interview. The second one was they discounted someone because they took notes at interview. And if you think about that, it's a non-reason for moving someone forward. So talent acquisition is now like, I have the proof and I have data to back up what I'm saying. This person would be great. And I think that then starts to really have a good culture change where people are starting to realize, oh yeah, this is actually, it's not necessarily replacing your decision making, but it's adding data to that decision.
Absolutely. Yeah. Get it part of the language.
Yeah.
We've got we do have another question in chat there, which is, if not stereotyping, why do we use Myers-Briggs, etc.? Are these types of tests still valid?
Yeah, I have an opinion about that. I'm sure David does too. I think I work with somebody really closely who's a coach, and one of the big values I think Myers-Briggs can bring is starting a conversation about things that motivate you, your behavior, your team. Like, oh, I'm a, I don't know, ABCD, you're a DEFG, whatever profile. I think sometimes you can have a good sort of interpersonal conversation about, oh, we work slightly differently. Myers-Briggs can't be used at recruitment. They actually told you that you can't, because of the way that the profile's put together. And I won't bore everyone about the with the details of that, but it's a good, I would say that anything like that can be a really good conversation started for a team environment. But I actually really agree with that second point. Sometimes people can hide behind a behavioral profile, and that's not great. So I think that you need to have a balance between what you use it for and how you can actually help to move people in the way that they need to for their performance. So how have I seen people hide behind it? They've said, I don't do detail, my profile says this, and that's it. Well, some people have to do detail, so you can't hide behind a profile. Or I've heard some horror stories where a manager said to somebody, and this was in my previous life, of, oh, you're not a dominance profile, which means you'll never be a leader. And I think, again, that's where data really helps this, because you can actually perpetuate a stereotype if you build a behavioral profile based on what you think is right. So I could be building a behavioral profile in my own image, but that's not necessarily what's helping with performance. So I think marrying data with the behavior and really understanding what differentiates is absolutely key, and that will stop some of those sort of stereotypes. And yeah, I think Sarah said she's found Myers-Briggs helped her to understand people better, and that's what it's really good for. But I think if it's taken too far, any behavioral profile can just act as a shield or an excuse to why you don't want to do something.
And just think about the stuff you're saying there, because you alluded to some of these high growth companies where they're doing things at pace really, really quickly. Everything's got to happen yesterday, doesn't it? What you're saying, does this slow things down? Does it speed it up? Does it make it better? How does it impact on that? Because I can imagine people saying, well, this is all well and good. We ain't got time for this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's really it's that balance between yeah, exactly. And I think it's the balance between friction. So does it add a lot of friction? There's some behavioral surveys out there that take 45 minutes to complete, and that's not great for a candidate to come in. I think 15 minutes as a behavioral survey, as an example, what we found is, first of all, it's pretty straightforward. A lot of our clients offer a feedback report to the candidate as well. So actually candidates get something back from the process, which I think we can all remember when we were candidates, and it's really hard because you apply to all these jobs and no one gives you any feedback or nothing. So it's really nice to have something there back. But what I would say is what's really interesting is now when people get more comfortable using these things, they actually use it to replace one of the interviews. Now, I know a lot of companies, even for junior roles, they go through about 4 rounds of interviews, expensive for the company and very annoying for the candidate. And so this is sometimes a candidate thinks, oh, wait, I can do this for 15 minutes and I can do it in my pajamas at home, and then I'm sort of like moved on. That's great. The other thing is positioning. So if you say to a candidate, we want to use this because we want to understand where we can best support you when you join, which is true because people use it for onboarding, the candidate's much more motivated to want to do it because people care about them and how they're going to succeed.
And I'm guessing, again, correct me if I'm wrong, that actually the cost of doing something wrong and then sort of having to put something back in place because it wasn't right in the first place you are saving long term anyway. That's where you're really going to start to see the benefits.
Yeah,
Stitching time saves
absolutely.
9 kind of springs to mind.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Cool. Let me just checking into chat. Is there anything more in there? Yeah, so I think again, if I'm understanding well, it's kind of like horses for courses. What you're talking about has got its place to be doing this particular thing, get right people in the right place. Other tools are to help with an understanding. Going back to my kind of thing, this conscious competence, this deliberate thinking about what it is that you're trying to do. That's where those Myers-Briggs and those kind of things would probably work better.
Yeah, absolutely.
So at risk of going off down a completely different presentation, the benefits of diversity, because I know again this is one of your big areas. It is slightly, it's a different keynote, Fred. Come on, let's move Zane off. Not welcome anymore. We're going down the, don't worry, we will. But again, if you could just highlight some of those things, because it is something that's been spoken about a lot, and I think it's a good platform to be championing it even further.
Yeah, so the benefits of diversity, there's so many. I mean, there's some studies that have found that teams that have more diverse people tend to perform better. When you drill that down into, what that team does, etc., that may be more true for some teams than others. But generally speaking, why diversity is so important is for a couple of reasons. One is there's a large proportion of people out there that could be excellent for what you need, and they are just they're just not even being considered for the role itself. And so, I've always come at diversity because, we created Aptology to level the playing field and make everyone be able to get an equal opportunity. And that's for, very value-driven reasons for me. If you talk about an organizational level, you're missing out on a pool of people that could be great for you. And if you just break it down to that, I think that's like the bare bones of like why you want people in. And I think that that's one of the key things that's there. The other thing is people have found that, your clients, they like buying from different types of people. Actually, if you want more diverse clients, you can have more diverse people. That sort of marries that along as well. But the other thing I think is that we have a very strict sort of like understanding of what good looks like. And I think as a society, we're moving away from that. We're much more casual about, how people dress, what they do, how they speak, accents, etc., than we used to do. But actually, that's one of the key things that I think is really helping with diversity and moving people along. People have very stereotypical views about what people are like. Everyone in here is in sales. I mean, I'm sure that you've all been on the receiving end of a bad salesperson stereotype where people are just like, I don't want to speak to you, where's the expert? That in itself is restricting that individual from so much knowledge that you could give them. And I think that's really where diversity comes in. And then the other thing that I'll mention, because you're right, I can talk for an hour and a half about this, Fred. But the one thing I will say is that diversity is one thing, you're bringing people in, and inclusion is very different. So diversity is bringing people into the company that are diverse. Inclusion is keeping them there. I always say diversity is like being asked to a party, and inclusion is being asked to dance. And so it's really important that when you bring people into an organization, they're set up to succeed within the company. Because if you keep everything else the same that you've done all the time, you've got not now diverse people, you're going to see that it's the leaky bucket syndrome. They're going to start to leave. And so you need to make sure that what you're doing is set up for other people. And I'll give a very real example, and it's hilarious. But basically, I was sat down next to someone in a networking event. I come from East London. I don't know anything about golfing and things like that. So I was like early stage career, sat down next to someone, and they were talking about golf. And I had no idea how to enter this conversation. Like, I didn't even know how to start. And then I remembered something that I'd heard about golf. And I turned around to him and said, what's your disability? And there was just silence around the entire room. And it was so embarrassing. And I thought, I asked a question. He said, did you mean handicap? And I was mortified. I went to the toilet. I had a cry. And I didn't go to another networking event for about 2 years. And this is because we were at a golf day. I had no idea what I was doing. So if you think about diversity and inclusion, do you have golf days for your clients? If so, who's more likely to come? People that are male or female, people that have, from certain socioeconomic background, etc. It's just some of those really small things that you would just never think of that make a big impact on someone. Another example, and then I'll stop, is we took someone who was doing work experience for me to the Ivy, and she didn't know what she was ordering from the menu, and she ended up with a plate full of beans. And it's things like that, you know, where you think, if you're not from and never been to a posh restaurant and don't speak French, for an example, what are you going to end up feeling like? So that's some of the really key things that I think are really important to the role.
Oh, that's cool. That is cool. I don't do golf days, but I might do one just so I can invite you. And you have to promise to ask that question.
Yeah, exactly.
No, Suchi, thank you so much. Again, I can see the comments in there. Again, you give people a lot of food for thought, you know, stimulating. So yeah, really do appreciate that.
Please don't tell anyone about that golf day thing.
Still making me giggle. So people can connect with you, LinkedIn. I guess that's a really good place to find you. Again, we'll share all these details later. But yeah, do appreciate your time. Thank you so much. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then when we come back, we will be talking to Zane Sennett, who I will give him his proper rank back after a massive apology to him. But we will. I'll see everyone in 5 minutes.